Let us start right away with the Battlemaster, which is the most famous Masterlevel path because of the famous bodyguard ability. This is what you would consider the defensive tank, and your role is to be peeling for your casters and bodyguard versus the tank trains. Class recommendations are generally defensive paths that don't have any other offensive Masterlevel paths like Armorsmith, Paladin for Albion, Hero, Warden, Railwalker for Hibernia, and the Warrior Thane Savage for Midgard, and Warlord for all realms. Battlemaster has many abilities. The most useful ones are Power Leak to interrupt someone who's bodyguarded, Grapple, Essence Flames to increase the damage of the group by giving them an offensive proc, throw weapon, and sometimes Essence Dampen and Shatter if you want to shear. Special attention to Grapple and Bodyguard, which I'm gonna explain now. Grapple roots the target in place, making him vulnerable to your caster attacks. He cannot be attacked in melee while he's grappled, and stuns the user for a bit longer than the target is rooted. This is very useful for tanks that run away from your caster train or try to reach your caster train. And Bodyguard, it targets a friendly character and makes other melee characters unable to attack your target. It's very strong. There's two circumstances in which it doesn't work. It is if your target is moving or if the bodyguarder casts any spell. If the target is bodyguarded, attackers will only get a message in their chat window saying this target is bodyguarded and cannot be attacked, so it's sometimes very confusing. If Battlemaster is the defensive tank, then Bane Lord is the offensive tank. It has a lot of interrupts as anti-caster and is more offensively orientated. Class recommendations is pretty much every class that can be a Bane Lord should be a Bane Lord. For Albion, Mercenary Reaver, sometimes Heretic when played offensively. For Hibernia, Blade Master, Champion and Vamp. And for Midgard, Berserker, and when played offensively, the Bone Dancer too. Bane Lord has many abilities and they all have complex effects, but really, to put it simple, you're only gonna use them to interrupt. As you can see, there's three groups of MLs that share a timer. The red ones, Zone of Mana, Inexorable Defeat, and Snaring Tendrils. The blue ones, ML2, 5 and 9. And the orange ones, ML3, 7 and 8. Out of those, the following ones interrupt. And since we're only gonna use them for interrupt, this makes our choice for master levels really easy. We're only really gonna use 3 of them to interrupt. That's Zone of Mana, because it has a 50% cast speed debuff. Oppression, which only reduces encumbrance, it's not that useful of an effect, but it does interrupt. And Demoralization, that's an effectiveness debuff, making casters do less damage. And then finally we have Bane Spike that just increases your damage and the damage of your group mates around you. It doesn't share a timer with any of the other MLs, so we are free to use it. Perfector is generally the healer, the support of the group. You don't want to spam Perfectors, but having one per group at the minimum is good to cure nearsight and to cure disease. For class recommendations, that is Cleric and Friar for Albion and Heretic when you need the backline support, Druid and Heal Warden for Hibernia, and Shaman for Midgard, and sometimes if you don't have a Shaman, you also want it on the Orc healer. Perfector has 10 abilities, 9 actives, 1 passive, but really we're only gonna use these ones, which is Purging Wave to cure group disease, which is very strong, Purify Senses, which is a fast nearsight cure, Font of Power when you're in keep fights and need some mana. It's a well that replenishes mana every few seconds. And then finally Cure Rest Sickness, which has a long cast time, is situationally very useful though. Sojourner, it's a bit hard to describe what Sojourner does. Generally it's a frontline role, it's also very versatile. For Albion I recommend it on Minstrel and Scout, for Hibernia on Bard and Ranger, and for Midgard on Healer, Skull and Hunter. Again, many abilities, but only 4 of them are really all that useful, which is Resistance of the Ancients, which gives essence resistance to the entire group. It's the only source of essence resistance. And then we have Forceful Zephyr, which is a CC ability that targets an enemy and sends him flying for 10 seconds. During that time, he cannot cast any spells or attack in melee, but he cannot be damaged. Debuffs apply normally, so you can even mess targets while they're in Zephyr. Phase Shift, which is probably even stronger, makes the user invulnerable for 10 seconds. During that time you cannot cast spells or attack, and it requires 50 endurance. You can cancel the ability to be able to cast again, but also obviously you drop the invulnerability. Then finally Gateway or Mass Gateway to teleport you or your group to the last Bind Stone. This ability doesn't work if any groupmate is in combat. Finally, the Caster Convoker. The role is for all casters and it has a bit more power for pet casters. For Albion, this is Thurgis, Wizard, Cabalist, Zork. For Hibernia, Animist, Banshee, Eldritch, and Enchanter. And for Midgard, Bone Dancer, Rune Master, Spirit Master, and Warlord. Out of the abilities, the most useful one is probably Speed Warp. It completely changes the meta. It suppresses movement speed effects for targets that enter the Speed Warp. So when you're engaging an enemy group, you always want to make sure that they have to enter your Speed Warp in order to reach your healers or your backline. Then it has a bunch of siege stuff, honestly self-explanatory, like wood to repair and crystal titans that you can drop in doorways or traps. You get the idea. Then there's Summoning Mastery or ML9, which boosts the effective level of your controlled pet, making it a bit more tanky and do more damage. And then finally Brittle Guard, which acts like a second blade term. It intercepts a melee hit and then dies. Warlord is a bit hard to explain, it just has many buffs. But to be perfectly honest, most other master level paths are better, that's why almost none of them picks them, except for the 3 here because they don't have other useful ML paths. For Albion, this is Necromancer, if you don't spec Convoker. For Hibernia, it's Mentalist, because the other one is bad and you already have a Speed Warp baseline. And Midgard Valkyrie, because your other path is also Stormlord. Warlord has many buffs that sometimes share a timer, but really the useful ones are Covering Bellow, Defending Martyr, and Warguard. Covering Bellow is a PBAOE pet scare that sends away minstrel pets or kills Thurgis pets instantly. Defending Martyr heals targets around you, but it costs the user 50% of his HP. And then finally Warguard, which is a very strong melee absorb buff for your allies. And finally Spymaster, which is reserved for the 3 Assassins of the Realm, Infiltrator, Nightshade, and Shadowblade. The useful abilities in my opinion are Poison Spike, which is a rune that after a short duration poisons an enemy that steps on it. Does quite a bit of extra damage. Pickpocket to increase token gain. Essence Flare is a PBAOE mass poison. And Blanket of Camouflage, which if you have a group of non-stealthers, stealths all of them, but they cannot move or attack, otherwise the stealth breaks. This leaves us with one master level path that I haven't really talked about, and the reason why there are no recommendations is because I generally don't recommend this path at all. It is too niche to be used as a main path. It offers some storms that are useful for keep defense, but in my opinion this doesn't justify picking an entire master level path for it. If you want to look at the abilities though, feel free to pause the video here.